Welcome, everyone, to this explainer. Today, we're not just going to sit here and recite generic success stories or feed you the exact same motivational cliches you've heard 1,000 times. Instead, we are going to actually deconstruct the psychological mechanics of elite performance. We're going to look right under the hood of the absolute top 1% of achievers, athletes, CEOs, artists, and figure out how their minds truly operate. Get ready because what we find today might completely flip how you view success.
What if literally everything we assume about greatness is wrong? We look at champions and we automatically think they possess some kind of extra superpower, right? Some special skill that we normal people just magically lack. But what if the exact opposite is true? What if greatness isn't an added ability, but actually a missing off switch? What if the absolute highest performers simply lack that internal limit that tells the rest of us when to stop?
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by looking at the missing off switch, then we'll move into mastering strategic suffering, explore the cost of obsession, examine false peaks and empty success, and finish up with finding the middle way.
Okay, let's dive into section 1, the missing off switch, the dark engine of ambition.
To truly understand top performers, we have to face a pretty uncomfortable truth about what really drives the elite. A lot of top performers are actually driven by a deep-seated insecurity, like a profound, almost terrifying fear of not being enough. They act like a hungry ghost, constantly trying to take external success, whether that's building a billion-dollar company or lifting a championship trophy, and shove it into an internal void, just hoping it will finally make them feel complete.
And to understand how they keep going, we really have to separate motivation from obsession. Motivation is saying, I want to do it. It's great spark, sure, but it's totally fleeting. Obsession, on the other hand, is I can't not do it. You are literally puppeted by your desire. Obsession acts as an incredibly powerful, entirely free fuel. You don't even need willpower when you literally can't stop thinking about your pursuit. But, as we'll see very shortly, it's also incredibly dangerous.
Plus, to reach the absolute pinnacle, you also need this: cultivated delusion. Think about it for a second. To beat an incumbent champion, or do something literally no human has ever done before, you actually must be slightly delusional about your own capabilities. But here's the really fascinating trick. It must be paired with deep, brutal self-criticism. You must obsess over every tiny flaw in your performance, while simultaneously believing you are absolutely destined to be the best.
All right, moving on to section 2, mastering strategic suffering, the mechanics of execution.
Because let's be real, obsession and delusion alone aren't enough to execute goals day in and day out. So how do champions actually execute? Well, it comes down to deliberate practice. And this isn't just mindlessly repeating a task. Deliberate practice means constantly working just outside your current skill level. It requires immediate feedback and correcting errors over and over and over again. As the famous dancer Martha Graham put it, it involves immense frustration and daily small deaths. It is just incredibly, profoundly mentally exhausting. Which brings us to the core difference between motivation and discipline. Like we said, motivation is that fleeting, unreliable spark. But discipline? Discipline is making peace with the mundane. It's steady, relentless repetition. And the surprising side effect here, as researchers note, is that discipline actually creates breathing room. Ultimately, the pain of discipline is so much cheaper than the pain of regret.
50. That is the number of hours athlete Ross Edgley continuously swam without touching land. Over 2 full days of swimming. Now, physical strength alone absolutely cannot get a human body through that. It requires a highly structured, almost bulletproof mental framework. Edgley calls this framework suffering strategically managed because high performers don't just grit their teeth and ignore pain. They practically manage it. Step 1. They anticipate the trapdoors, knowing exactly when they're going to want to quit. Step 2. They have solutions ready for that exact moment. And step 3. They outsource their motivation. When their own willpower inevitably fails, they rely on a team, a coach, or their environment to practically pull them through. Now for section 3, the cost of obsession, when the drive breaks you. There is a really heavy toll to all of this. I mean, what happens when this dark engine of ambition starts breaking the machine itself? Psychologists actually differentiate between harmonious passion, where an activity is just a really healthy part of your identity, and obsessive passion. Obsessive passion is a compulsive urge. The pursuit completely takes over. You begin to ignore your physical limits entirely, and it inevitably crashes into and damages other areas of your life.
And this isn't just a philosophical idea, it is strictly empirical. In a 38-week study on professional dancers, those who exhibited harmonious passion had absolutely no association with injury interruptions. But the ones driven by obsessive passion, they had a directly higher incidence of severe musculoskeletal injuries that flat out stopped them from dancing. The obsession literally broke their bodies.
And this obsession breaks way more than just bodies. It forces brutal trade-offs. Ambitious people sacrifice friends, family, social lives, financial security, and personal peace. And the brutal truth of competition is simply this. If you aren't willing to sacrifice these things for your primary pursuit, well, there's a competitor out there who is. So they sacrifice everything, and they make it. They arrive at the top.
Which leads perfectly into Section 4, False Peaks and Empty Success, the Arrival Fallacy. So what actually happens when elite performers reach the absolute pinnacle of their field? They often slam right into something called the arrival fallacy. This is the persistent, honestly crushing illusion that reaching a specific goal will finally bring lasting happiness. You think, once I hit $1 million or once I win the championship, I'll finally be happy. But you get there and the horizon just moves one step further away. The internal struggle, it's still right there with you. We can call this the Ferrari illusion. An achiever thinks the Ferrari will magically fix the void. They get it, they sit down in it, and realize they are exactly the same person with the exact same insecurities, just sitting in a much nicer car. You can't leapfrog this realization. External prestige rarely, if ever, creates any meaningful internal fulfillment. Take the really heartbreaking, yet somehow triumphant story of Eddie Hall. He sacrificed everything for over a decade to win World's Strongest Man. He finally wins, stands on the podium, cries, and dedicates it to his late grandmother. And then he immediately retires, literally right there on the podium. He realized that this was a false peak, and if he didn't walk away from his obsession at that exact moment, he was going to lose his wife and kids. And that brings us to Section 5, Finding the Middle Way, Sustainable Excellence. That realization Eddie Hall had is critical. How do we actually synthesize everything we've learned into a model for high performance that is actually sustainable? To find that sustainable excellence, we face a massive philosophical divide. On the left, you've got the Western hustle. Work until your eyes bleed, deny how you feel, crush the competition. On the right, Eastern mindfulness. Renounce worldly possessions, let go of the ego, live in a cave. Honestly, most of us are not built for either extreme. We need to play within the confines of the game, but without letting the game absolutely destroy us. We need a synthesis. That synthesis is best described by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi as flow. Flow happens when you find the perfect balance between a very high challenge and your very high skill. Our minds can only process about 110 bits of information per second. In flow, your goal is so clear and the feedback is so immediate that every single bit of that processing power is completely engaged. Your ego disappears, you totally lose track of time. It's the ultimate state of intrinsically rewarded, sustainable high performance. So the absolutely crucial point is this. Protecting your well-being while achieving greatness requires flexibility. It requires strategic quitting. We are constantly told to never give up, right? But science actually tells us that blind persistence in the face of inevitable failure causes irreparable damage. Dropping a failing goal and shifting to a more realistic one isn't weakness. It's literally a scientifically backed strategy for optimal performance and actual happiness. I really want to leave you with this final, lingering thought today. Ask yourself honestly, if you strip away the achievements, the titles, the money, and all the external validation, who would you be if you weren't constrained by the constant need to perform? Answering that question might just be the most important work you ever do. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.